Today, we have the honor of hearing from one of the top Democratic leaders in the House of Representatives. For more than a decade, the pro-Israel movement has been fortunate to call Congressman Hakeem Jeffries a friend. During his 6 years as a member of the New York State Assembly, and since 2013 as a representative for New York's 8th District in the House. This past year, Congressman Jeffries was named House Democratic Caucus Chair, a key Democratic leadership post, and he co-led the congressional delegation to Israel with 40 other Democratic members of the House of Representatives, including Majority Leader Steny Hoyer. He joins us today to share details from his time that they spent on the ground in Israel, including several days with their colleagues from across the aisle. Please join me in welcoming Congressman Hakeem Jeffries. Thank you so much for being here today with us. And on behalf of everyone in this room, I want to also thank you for joining the Democratic trip this summer and for playing a leadership role there. Extraordinary. Thank you. Could you please share a little bit about your personal connection to Israel and some takeaways from the trip? And specifically, what was it like interacting with some of the new members of the Democratic Party?
Well, good afternoon, everyone. It's great to be here to see so many leaders in the pro-Israel community, pro-Israel movement here at AIPAC's Policy Conference. I've had the opportunity now to travel to Israel 4 different times during my public service journey. Looking forward to heading back to Israel sometime soon. I was saying to a member that at some point I'm scheduled to be back. I was hoping to get there in January, and then some Washington, D.C. related things kept me here. But someone said to me, they said, Hakeem, you're going to Israel a 5th time? I said, listen, I'm from New York City. And back home in New York City, we consider Jerusalem to be the 6th borough. And so I'm just trying to catch up with my constituents. Now, this most recent trip was a really special one because, as you mentioned, led by Steny Hoyer, who's a tremendous leader within the Congress and pro-Israel advocate. But we were joined by so many members of this dynamic new freshman class, many of whom visited Israel for the first time and were committed to being on the ground and learning firsthand for themselves the importance of the USIsrael relationship from a strategic standpoint, from a values standpoint, and it was a great dialogue. There was a lot of conversation about narrative, which I think was very important, one of my big takeaways, because there are some who want to define how we in Congress should view the relationship between the United States and Israel's place in the Middle East. But I think when you're on the ground, for me, it's always been clear that Israel lives in an incredibly tough neighborhood. When you think about, the dangerous situation in the Sinai to the south, Hamas in Gaza, Hezbollah to the north, Syria in chaos to the east, Iraq still a mess, Iran with nuclear ambitions and a tremendously bad actor. I grew up in Brooklyn in the late 80s and early 90s. I know from tough neighborhoods, Israel lives in a tough neighborhood. And when you live in a tough neighborhood and when you go on a trip and you're able to experience that through the eyes of those who have to live it every day, then you know why it's important for Israel to maintain its qualitative military edge, to continue to be strong. And we're certainly committed to that because in a tough neighborhood, at the end of the day, the only constant is strength. And that's why we want to make sure that Israel remains as strong as it can possibly be.
Now, as you mentioned, on almost all of its borders, Israel faces numerous and growing threats to its security and to the lives of its citizens from Iran, Hamas, Hezbollah. The security assistance the United States generously provides to Israel each year is vital to ensure Israel's ability to defend herself. And as we all have heard also, some Democratic candidates for president have advocated conditioning or potentially even cutting that aid. Can you share with us your thoughts on the future of U.S. security assistance to Israel?
Well, certainly proud to have supported the $38 billion commitment between the United States and Israel, historic commitment that was executed in 2016 that we continue to maintain moving forward. And we'll do so and believe that we have to do so in the best interest of the United States and in the best interest of Israel without any precondition. And you know, recently when we passed the National Defense Authorization Act in a strongly bipartisan way, it was another important step that we took in this Congress with a House Democratic majority, doing it in a bipartisan way to provide an additional $500 million for missile defense systems and continued innovation in that area, whether it's David's Arrow, David's Sling, Iron Dome, all of which are incredibly important, and that technology gets shared between our two countries, as well as anti-tunnel, anti-drone technology and innovation, which is incredibly important as well. And we're going to continue. As long as I have the opportunity to serve in Congress, I'm going to make sure that that aid continues in a strongly robust fashion, no conditions.
Thank you. As I mentioned during the introduction, you are the distinguished chair of the Democratic Caucus. Some of the members of the caucus have gotten a lot of attention for the confrontational manner in which they have approached a variety of issues, including our issues. Could you give us a view of your colleagues looking across the totality of the caucus? Yeah,
well, you know, it's been an honor to serve as the chair of the House Democratic Caucus, one of the most, actually the most diverse legislative caucus now in the history of the country. More women serving in Congress than ever before, more African Americans, Latinos, Asian Americans. So we're a big, diverse family. We're a robust family. We're an enthusiastic family. The one thing I can say is that we will remain a strongly pro-Israel family as well. And I think that was made clear with great leadership from Steny Hoyer and Elliot Engel and Ted Deutsch and Brad and others, when in a bipartisan way, we put a resolution on the floor of the House to condemn BDS and the effort to try to delegitimize the state of Israel. It was important that the vote was overwhelming amongst every member of the House of Representatives, Democrats and Republicans, that there was overwhelming support amongst the Democratic caucus. That was important. And there was even overwhelming support amongst the Congressional Progressive Caucus as well. And I think that that was particularly important. And that really is the spirit of where our center of gravity is related to the U.S. and Israel at the moment.
Thank you. On our last question, I think it's fair to say that the partisan atmosphere in Washington and around the country has reached a stunning crescendo in the recent months between the upcoming elections, impeachment, and the general lack of cooperation in getting meaningful legislation passed on Capitol Hill. It seems that Congress is paralyzed by partisanship. For us in this room who care so deeply about the U.S.-Israel relationship, how do we transcend this hyper-partisan environment to promote a strong relationship between our country and Israel, especially when it has been historically a bipartisan priority?
Well, I think your presence here today is incredibly important, and the conversations that you'll be having later on today at the reception, and also, of course, as you descend upon the Hill and interact with members in both the House and the Senate, to emphasize that, of course, the relationship is anchored in values. The relationship is anchored in Israel being an incredibly strong ally and friend in one of the toughest parts of the world, and that's strategically important to the safety and well-being, of course, of our country and the people that we represent. And that, you know, at the end of the day, the way I like to talk about the relationship between our two countries is that it shouldn't be about Donald Trump and Netanyahu, or Joe Biden and Benny Gantz, or Likud and the Republican Party, or blue and white and the Democratic Party. It's about the United States and Israel. And if we keep it there and rise above the partisanship, then the tremendous relationship that has existed from the founding of the State of Israel in 1948, anchored around the principle of Israel as a Jewish and democratic state, living in safety and security and peace and prosperity, hopefully one day with a demilitarized Palestinian state side by side, that if we keep it about the U.S. and Israel and the shared values and the shared relationship and the shared strategic interests, we will continue to rise above the partisanship of the moment today. Thank you.
Congressman, you have shown again today why you are such a leader in Congress, and we are extraordinarily lucky to call you a friend.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for being here.
Great to be here. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much.